Here's another one of those hot button subjects that we discuss here, and another one that I've got a particular interest in because President Trump has confirmed that they are looking at reclassifying marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 and expects a decision within a couple of weeks, which means they can't be smoking it themselves because otherwise they'd need a lot longer to reflect on it, write poems about it, and maybe even have a dream walk in which they work out what would be the right schedule. Let's have a look at Trump giving that speech right now. Me and Sage will talk about the benefits and deficits of such a policy.
Is going to reclassify marijuana. Would that send mixed messages that if marijuana is okay, some drugs are okay, but we're trying to clean up crime? How do they go hand in hand?
We're only looking at that. That's early, but somebody reported it, which is fine. We're looking at it. Some people like it, some people hate it. Some people hate the whole concept of marijuana because if it does bad for the children, it does bad for people that are older than children. But we're looking at reclassification, and we'll make a determination over the next few weeks. And that determination hopefully will be the right one. It's a very complicated subject, the subject of marijuana. I've heard great things having to do with medical, and I've had bad things having to do with just about everything else. But medical and, for pain and various things, I've heard some pretty good things. But for other things, I've heard some pretty bad things.
When I watch Trump live, I'm always reassured just on the personal level that he's a person that I would enjoy being around. What I find difficult when I read the content or watch the content of the many vociferous and articulate people that detest Donald Trump, I always think, how have you missed this kind of affability that he has, this kind of common touch, this vernacular ease? Now, with regard to this particular matter, I'm a drug addict in recovery, and for me, a 12-step oriented abstinence-based solution is an absolute non-negotiable must. But I've always regarded, Sage, the issue of addiction as a mental health one rather than a criminal judicial one. So any measures that ultimately reorient public consciousness towards regarding drug dependency or drug use, even though many people, of course, would say that, marijuana or cannabis oughtn't even be regarded as a drug because it's, natural, and all of the sort of common arguments that are offered to exempt cannabis from the regulatory laws that would apply to something like cocaine or heroin or LSD or ketamine or MDMA. I'm just thinking of a list of things that would get me through the afternoon with a smile on my face, and that I hope there's not a trace of in that dormitory room from which Sage Steele is streaming right now. What do you feel? Do you think it's generally positive for economic reasons, political reasons, and criminal judicial reasons? And what do you think it suggests about the overall purview of the Trump administration when it comes to subjects like addiction, criminality, and recreational drug use?
Yeah, I like that they are willing to have discussions about this and really weigh the pros and cons, the positives and negatives, and try to make the right decision, which is never 100%, you know, good or bad based on your perspective. Like, not everybody's going to agree. Here's where I'm kind of a prude about this, and I'll admit, um, I've never smoked pot in my life. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. I've led a pretty boring, clean life in that way, Russell. And I actually know President Trump has never taken a drink in his life either. So I would assume, especially based on the way he's speaking, that he also has not done any sort of drug. And he's been very open about that because his brother was an alcoholic and died from alcoholism, and that's why he's never touched it. He saw the devastation of it from a very young age. There's addiction in my family, and to me, it is a gateway drug. That's just from my experience. So therefore, I have a fear in general of anything like that. It is certainly, we've become desensitized to it, just like alcohol, through the last several decades. And, it went from, oh my gosh, you're smoking pot in your dorm room, that could never happen, to, it's pretty common in dorm rooms, and sometimes the RAs do nothing about it. It scares me. It just, to me, it leads, it's a gateway. One thing leads to another. But I also understand and respect the positives involved, including the medical marijuana. Cancer patients that I know that have found solace in that, and it has helped them physically and mentally. So that's why I think it's smart for them to go deep and really discuss the pros and cons. It is confusing based on the state. We do want states running a lot of things, right? Like education. Abortion is by the states now, as I think it always should have been. So where's that line? Do we want it state? Do we want it federal? Like for what topic? For what issues? It's a tough one for me, but I admit to being sensitive because of some of the experiences in my family.
I feel that in general, the government has no business intervening in a person's experiments in consciousness. And I suppose when I was when the lines were in the culture were more clearly drawn, when on one side there were people that were pro free speech, pro civil rights, pro general permissiveness, and that was regarded as the cultural and social left. I strongly believed in like the perspective of someone like Terence McKenna, a brilliant genius, ethnobotanist, and psychedelic journeyman who believed that access to these states is pivotal and fundamental for advancing societies and cultures. In my country at the moment, they're doing experiments on DMT, IV experimentation. DMT is a powerful hallucinogen. And the reason that they're experimenting with DMT is because a lot of people who take these psychedelics and hallucinogens, in particular the one I just named, are discovering consistent experience, vivid yet consistent
Yeah.
experiences that sort of suggest an objective ulterior reality. Now, I'm interested in that, of course, for spiritual reasons, because the claims that are made by any of us that have a belief in a spiritual realm and believe that the most powerful level of reality is not received through the senses but through the spirit, i.e., we live by faith and not by sight, we don't conform to the patterns of this world. On that basis, I see the use of substances, consciousness altering substances is potentially important, not necessarily for everybody, but I
Yeah.
think it's one when we're looking at what are going to be the complex solutions to a world that seems increasingly divided and on the precipice of all manner of crises and conflagration. Well, it would seem altering consciousness might be a solution and finding new ways of looking at reality. Like, so that's one sort of somewhat esoteric perspective, that human beings should have access to their full capacity and should be able to use drugs if they can safely do it. That obviously doesn't include me. I can't safely use drugs. I'm a lunatic. But the other argument is I don't think the state has got any business in. I believe in minimal interventionism. I think that the role of the state should not be of pedagogy or demagoguery, but simply of the administration of social tasks decreed by a consensus delivered by the electorate. I wouldn't have political leaders grandstanding and offering moral and ethical positions. It would just be, this is when we're collecting your trash. This is when we are concreting over that paving. This is how we're going to protect that particular border, minimize their power and their intervention. So something like, if control of the government is so granular that they get to decide whether or not a substance can be taken by adults, I think that's an indication that what's been normalized is a level of authoritarianism that needs to be radically reviewed, whether it's under, a supposed Democrat like Kamala Harris or the current administration.